She banged on my door so hard it felt like she was trying to break it down. Before I could even open, her voice cut through the morning air like a knife. "You don't belong here." "This land belongs to the HOA now." She waved a stack of papers in my face as if they were law. My hands trembled not from fear but from rage I was holding back. I knew the land was mine. My father left it to me when he passed, and I had every legal document tucked safely in a fireproof box. But Karen didn't care about truth. She cared about power. Her eyes narrowed as she leaned in close. "If you don't leave tonight, I'll make sure your family disappears." My wife, standing behind me with our young daughter clinging to her leg, gasped at the words. It wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore, it was a threat to our lives. For a moment, silence wrapped around us, only broken by my little girl's sob. I forced myself to stay calm, even though every muscle in my body screamed to push back. "You just crossed a line," I said slowly. She smirked, pulled out her phone, and started dialing. "Let's see how tough you are when the police drag you out in handcuffs," she spat. But what she didn't know was that the officers she was calling weren't the real problem. It was the man standing in her shadow, dressed in plain clothes with a handgun barely visible under his jacket. He wasn't a cop, he was one of her so-called enforcers. I stepped back, scanning him carefully. He shifted, his hand twitching near his weapon, and my pulse quickened. Karen thought she could scare me out with fake notices and screaming matches, but now she had brought someone armed onto my property. My wife whispered, "What if they try to come inside?" That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about land anymore. This was about survival. The man with the gun stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel of my driveway. Karen grinned like she had already won. "This is HOA security," she announced loudly, as if saying it made it true. "He has the right to remove you by force." My jaw tightened. I knew enough about the law to understand how dangerous this lie was. No one, especially not a self-appointed HOA guard, had the right to bring a weapon onto my land. He glanced at Karen, waiting for her command. She nodded slightly, and his hand dropped closer to the grip of his pistol. My daughter started crying louder, and my wife pulled her back into the house. That sound, my little girl crying out of fear, snapped something inside me. I raised my hand slowly, showing I wasn't holding anything, but my voice cut sharp through the air. "Step one foot on this porch and it'll be the last mistake you ever make." Karen laughed, high and shrill. "Listen to him pretending to be some tough guy. He's nothing. He'll fold the second the cops arrive." But she didn't know me. I wasn't just some guy living quietly on inherited land. I had spent 12 years in the military, and every instinct in me was telling me this situation was seconds away from turning deadly. The fake guard sneered. "You got 5 seconds to walk off this porch." He lifted his shirt just enough to show the polished steel of his handgun. My eyes locked on it, calculating distance, reaction time, angles. I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of what would happen if he forced me to defend my family. Karen folded her arms, watching like it was a game. "Do it," she whispered to him. "Drag him out. Show his family what happens when people disobey the HOA." And that's when headlights appeared at the end of my driveway, moving fast. Karen's face lit up. "Finally," she hissed. "Backup is here." But as the engine roared closer, I recognized that car, and it wasn't hers. It was someone I trusted with my life. The headlights cut the morning heat like a blade, and my heart skipped, only for a second. The SUV stopped, the door opened, and a man I hadn't seen in years stepped out. He wore no uniform, just a plain jacket and a look that made the fake guard freeze. For a moment I couldn't place him, then my wife whispered my brother's name. My brother? He'd been undercover for years with the FBI. He moved like someone who knew how to read danger a half-second before it happened. Karen's grin went white. "Oh, finally," she stammered, but the tremor in her voice gave her away. The man from the SUV scanned the scene in one slow, clean pass, then looked straight at me. "You all right?" he asked, voice low. I nodded, relief and anger mixing so sharp it tasted like metal. My brother didn't wait for explanations. He faced the fake guard, and the guard's confidence cracked for the first time. "You don't have any authority here," my brother said. "Who are you working for?" The guard swallowed and tried to bluff. "HOA security." "We—" My brother cut him off with a look that said he'd seen that exact lie too many times. He took out his phone, tapped once, and suddenly the tone of the morning changed. 2 more unmarked cars rolled in. Real law, solid and quiet. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Karen's hand went to her phone like a reflex, but now she was the one who looked trapped. My little girl clung to my leg so tight I could feel her heartbeat. My wife's hand found mine. I felt braced, like a man whose old life and new life had collided and held. Karen tried to recover, voice high and venomous. They called the police on us, she cried, but the officers stepping out were not hers. One of them showed a badge, plain and legal. We got a call about an armed trespasser, he said. His eyes flicked to the man with the gun. Sir, drop the weapon and step away. The guard's hand trembled. For the first time, the gun felt small and useless in his grip. He had thought power came from intimidation. He didn't count on real authority, on people who could read lies. Karen's face tightened. She was calculating, searching for a way to flip the scene back to her favor. That's when she said it loud and cold. You'll regret this. I'll make sure you lose everything. My brother stepped forward close enough that his shadow fell over Karen. You already tried, he said. Impersonation threats? Lots of people have made noise and then disappeared when the evidence shows up. He nodded toward the porch camera I'd installed years ago after my father's illness. Quiet. Ugly proof I'd never meant to use. My throat went dry. If that footage came out, Karen's empire of noise would be gone. But she wasn't finished. She spat. You think you can stop me? You don't know who I am. The last thing she expected was my wife speaking up, voice shaking but steady. We know enough. The camera blinked and the world seemed to tilt. Karen's face changed. Fear, then fury. Then she chose a new lie, louder and darker. They threatened my family first, she cried, pointing at my wife and daughter as if she could flip guilt like a switch. The guard, now cornered, took a step toward the porch again, fast, panicked, dangerous. My brother's hand moved like lightning, not toward violence but to the holster at his hip where a badge case sat visible now. One more step, he warned. The guard hesitated. The air felt thin. My daughter started to scream. I felt time narrow to the width of breath. Something in me, old and trained and furious, flared up, ready to act if the next move came from him, not the law. He moved like a man with nothing to lose, sudden, ugly, and fast. 1 second he was shouting. The next he stepped off the gravel toward the porch, hand diving for the gun at his hip. Time narrowed. My daughter's scream cut through everything. My brother shouted, "Drop it!" The guard kept coming. I didn't think about laws or headlines. I thought about my wife and my child. I thought about the way that thug's finger curled toward a trigger. I fired once, not to kill, to stop. The sound cracked the morning open. The guard staggered and fell, clutching his leg. He had a second weapon tucked low, hidden by the jacket. The cops moved in hard and fast, cuffing him before he could reach it. Karen screamed like someone who'd been caught mid-script. You monster. You shot him. He's a security officer. Her voice trembled. But the porch camera blinked and the neighbor with the binoculars shouted, You asked for help. This was on your call. My brother was already talking to the officers, calm and quick, pointing at the camera and the hidden second gun. He reached for a weapon, he said. He came armed to commit violence. The officer asked me to sit, hands shaking, and my wife pressed the child into my lap, as if she could hide us both in my arms. They hustled the guard onto the curb. I watched as the reality in front of me unfolded. The second gun, his wounds, the way his eyes searched for a lie to save him. The lead officer checked my hands, then looked at me like a man who'd seen too many dangerous mornings. You acted to protect your family, he said quietly. But the words were small against the shouting from Karen. She kept inventing stories, fake medical records, fake HOA badges, a web of phone calls she tried to spin into proof. Then a neighbor came forward, breathless, holding a printout she'd taken from the camera feed on her phone. The footage showed everything. The guard stepping onto the property, his hand moving to the gun, Karen's face as she nodded him on. The little nod, so small, said more than her loud threats. My throat tightened. I had always kept that camera for the heavy nights after my father's sickness. I never thought I'd need it to stop someone from hurting my family. They put the wounded man in an ambulance. He shouted threats even from the stretcher, calling names, claiming he'd been set up. Karen's smiles were gone. She stared at me like I'd broken her script. My wife squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Are you okay? She whispered. I lied and said I was. Inside I felt raw and hollow and strangely awake all at once. My brother stayed at my side. He looked at the footage, then at the officers, then at me. We've got a record, he said flatly. We've got witnesses. That camera's the truth. He tapped his phone. We'll need statements. Get ready. My stomach dropped. Ready for what? I didn't know. Ready for court, for questions, for a world that would pick apart that single shot in slow motion. Karen, escorted by a neighbor who seemed suddenly less impressed, shouted one last promise. You'll pay. I'll bury you. Her voice was thin. The officer clipped a notice on her door, some kind of trespass warning, and told her to leave the neighborhood. The viral line, what everyone would remember, came out of my wife between sobs. She threatened to kill my family. He shot a trespassing HOA member to protect us. The sentence landed like a hammer. People around us repeated it with sharp, quick faces. As the ambulance left and the sirens faded, I sat on my porch and looked at the camera that had just saved us. The sky felt too wide. My daughter's small hand found mine, and for a second everything that had happened boiled down to that pulse against my palm. I had stopped a man from getting to my family, but the world I'd protected was about to ask me to prove why I did it. The twist wasn't over. Something on the guard's still-wet jacket caught my eye. A partial patch under the jacket lining with a logo I recognized from a lawsuit I'd read years ago. Karen wasn't just a bully with a phone. She'd built a network. I'd thought the morning was finished. I was wrong. They put me in the back of a cruiser for a few hours, not because they didn't believe me, but because procedure is loud and slow. My wife and daughter sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket from a neighbor. People whispered like a tide, some ashamed, some angry, some hungry for the next detail. My brother stayed with me, silent and steady, like a man holding a plan in his fists. When the officer read me my rights, I watched Karen on the sidewalk, pacing, lips moving like she was rehearsing lines for the next performance. At the station, they asked the same questions a dozen ways. I answered the same way each time. The camera footage sat burning in everyone's phones and in the report. Clean, ugly, undeniable. The lead detective kept glancing at my brother. You two tied? He asked. My brother only shook his head. Just family, he said. But later, leaning close in a hallway, he clicked his tongue and muttered something about patterns. He had pulled up the guard's jacket photo and zoomed on that small half-hidden patch. I thought it was nothing, a scrap of cloth. He said, look, the patch wasn't random. It matched a private company, Red Oak Protective Services, named in a string of complaints I'd half-read years ago. My stomach dropped. Red Oak wasn't about gentle patrols. They'd been in a lawsuit for staging evictions and for working with shadier HOA leaders. My brother tapped his phone again and got a forwarding list. Phone numbers, emails. Most of them tied back to a cluttered office, a town over where Karen had registered an HOA committee. My mind tensed. This thing was not a single bad day. It was a plan. When the detective called the guard's phone records, messages poured out. Short, blunt instructions, timestamps, and one clear line from a contact labeled Karen. The messages said, make him leave. If he resists, make it quick. The words hit like stones. Karen hadn't just hired someone. She had ordered violence. I felt sick, then cold, then something like justice tightening. The detective's face changed. He closed his notebook slowly and said, that's not just a bad actor. That's premeditated. Back at the house, the neighbors who had stayed came forward one by one. Old Mrs. Langley admitted she'd signed a petition months ago for a community patrol, after Karen convinced half the block that outsiders were moving in. A young couple admitted Red Oak trucks had been circling at night. A man I'd always waved to told the officer he'd seen Karen meeting with a man in a suit 3 weeks earlier. Money, he'd guessed, changing hands in a parking lot. Pieces clicked together. I felt both small and huge. Small because none of this would have stopped by itself. Huge because the footage and the neighbors were a chain that could hold. Karen's face on the porch was a mask. She'd expected to flip the world with a call and a scream. Instead, she watched officers walk to her door with a warrant. Her lawyer showed up fast, eyes bright with threats about civil suits, about ruining reputations. He said loud and practiced, "You'll be named in every complaint." Her voice was sharp, but brittle edges showed. My brother, told me quietly, "Let them talk." He'd already pulled up municipal records and found that the HOA committee Karen claimed to run was never filed properly. She'd been building an authority out of air. Then came the real blow. The detective called me into a small room and opened the guard's phone on the table. There were photos, clear, damning, of Karen handing over a stack of paper to the guard, of cash sliding across a counter. There were voice memos with her laughing, saying, "Make it look like they started it." My mouth went dry. Karen had not only planned intimidation, she'd scripted it. The officer looked at me and said, "We're charging the guard with attempted assault and impersonation. We're opening a larger investigation into the HOA and Red Oak." Word spread online before dinner. Someone had uploaded the porch camera clip with a single caption, "HOA Karen threatened to kill my family. I shot a trespassing HOA member to protect us." The clip blew up in the neighborhood chat. Comments poured in. Support, anger, and more dangerously, questions. Some asked if I'd overreacted. Others wanted names. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it, leaked a version where the guard had been threatened first. It didn't fit the footage, but spin moves fast. That night, lights in my house felt different, brighter and colder. My daughter slept between us but woke once and whispered, "Will the lady come back?" I stroked her hair and lied like every parent does. "No, baby, she won't." My brother sat beside me and said, "You did what you had to." He showed me a list on his phone, evidence to file, witnesses to call, a reporter he knew who would listen if we were ready. He paused, then added, "There's more, though. Red Oak's owner has ties to the town council. Karen's got friends who can make this messy." The twist landed like thunder. Karen didn't just want power in our cul-de-sac. She wanted to scare people off so a developer could buy parcels cheap. The land behind our house wasn't just trees and hill. It had a permit pending, one that would make a small fortune if parcels cleared. That explained the money, the private guards, the fake notices. Suddenly the threat had teeth bigger than threats at a porch. It was a plan to push people out and cash in. I felt anger, yes, but also a calm sharpening into focus. We had the camera, the messages, the neighbors, and a brother who knew how to pull threads. But Karen had a network, money, and the ability to poison stories. The world outside our porch wasn't just watching. It was already choosing sides. I realized protecting my family would mean more than a single shot. It would mean fighting a machine, and the machine didn't like being filmed. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing like a hive that had been disturbed. Flyers appeared on porches, some praising Karen, some warning about the violent homeowner who shot a guard. My daughter peeked through the blinds and whispered, "Mommy, are people coming for us?" My wife held her tight, whispering back, "Not while we're together." I sipped coffee, staring at the street, realizing that even with the guard out of commission, the war had just started. My brother was already on the phone, connecting dots. He found financial transactions, HOA meeting minutes that didn't exist, and emails from Red Oak instructing Karen on intimidation tactics. "She's been building a small army," he muttered. "Not just a guard, not just a fake notice. She's been collecting power quietly for years." I felt a chill. This wasn't a random Karen meltdown. It was a system she'd constructed ready to strike anyone she wanted off her map. By noon, Karen tried to confront me again, her car pulling up like she owned the street. But this time I had cameras on the driveway, the porch, and even the tree line. As she got out, phone in hand, she froze. Every step she took was recorded, and she knew it. She shouted something about legal rights, but I was done arguing. I simply held my daughter close and watched. Her threats sounded smaller in the light of evidence and attention. Then came the twist I didn't expect. One of Karen's supposed allies approached me. An older man from the neighborhood, someone I'd nodded to for years. He whispered urgently, "She's planning to sell the land behind your house. The development company is ready to move in as soon as she pushes people out." My pulse quickened. The hill behind our house, thick with trees and wildflowers, was under threat. This wasn't about the porch anymore. It was about our family legacy, land my father had left us, and a fortune Karen wanted to steal through fear and manipulation. I felt anger flare, sharp and hot. My brother, sensing the moment, pulled me aside. "We can't just defend ourselves," he said. "We need to expose her. Legal, public, and viral. We need every neighbor on record." I nodded. The plan began forming like a blueprint in my head. Evidence, witnesses, and the public eye would be our weapons. Karen might have started the war, but she had underestimated what we could do when cornered. By evening, I reviewed every clip from the porch, the driveway, and hidden angles from my camera system. Each file told a story. Karen's nod to the guard, her instructions, her lies about ownership. Then I noticed something chilling. Emails from her personal account with plans to intimidate more families. This wasn't just a fight over my land. It was a pattern. Her reach extended beyond our street. I felt the weight of responsibility press down. My family's safety was no longer the only concern. It was exposing a dangerous network before it could hurt anyone else. I turned to my wife, gripping her hand. We fight smart. We fight clean. But we fight until this ends. Her eyes met mine, fierce and steady. She knew what that meant. The final twist of the day came just as the sun set. Karen's car was gone, but a man I didn't recognize had left a package at our doorstep. A legal document, thick and official-looking. My stomach sank as I read the top line. Notice of intent to file emergency injunction against you. Inside, accusations were wild. Trespassing, threats, unlawful weapon use. But it was unsigned, unverified, just a scare tactic. And in the corner of the page, almost hidden, a small watermark revealed the sender. Red Oak Protective Services. Karen wasn't acting alone. That night, as I watched my daughter sleep, I realized the fight wasn't just about protecting what was ours. It was about exposing a system built to crush families like ours. And we had the proof. The cameras, the neighbors, my brother, and something Karen never counted on. A family that refused to back down. By the next morning, my brother had turned my dining room into a war room. Laptops open, files spread out, a whiteboard filled with arrows connecting Karen's name to Red Oak, the developer, and the town council. We're going to hit them on 3 fronts, he said. Legal, public, financial. He slid a folder to me, copies of deeds, camera footage, sworn neighbor statements. This is enough to freeze her project and bring charges, he added, if we go loud. Karen must have sensed the shift. Her car didn't show up that day, but her lawyer did. A man in a dark suit, slick hair, and a grin made for courtrooms. He stood at the edge of my driveway, refusing to step onto my property because of the trespass notice now posted on my fence by the sheriff. Mr. Carter, he called out, voice like oil. You've made a very big mistake. My client intends to sue for defamation, harassment, and unlawful use of deadly force. I didn't answer. My brother filmed him from the porch, the red light blinking. The lawyer saw it and adjusted his tie, smile thinning. You're fighting the inevitable, he said, turning back toward his car. Developments like this are progress. You're in the way. You can't win. My wife came out, holding our daughter close. Tell Karen she picked the wrong family, she said, voice shaking but loud enough for the neighbors across the street to hear. The lawyer stopped but didn't turn around. He just got in his car and drove away. That was our opening. We uploaded the full porch footage to a public drive and shared the link with every neighbor, every local journalist, and a few watchdog groups my brother had worked with in the past. Within hours, the clip had over 50,000 views. Headlines started popping up. HOA terror. Private guards sent to evict homeowners. Family defends property against armed HOA thugs. Karen's name was suddenly trending and not in the way she wanted. Then came the legal hammer. My brother filed a restraining order against Karen on behalf of my wife and daughter. He also sent a cease and desist to Red Oak Protective Services citing harassment, impersonation, and endangerment of minors. At the same time, a local reporter knocked on our door for an interview. My wife told her the story with tears in her eyes, our daughter clinging to her arm. She threatened to kill my family, my wife said softly. My husband shot a trespassing HOA member to protect us. It wasn't spin. It was exactly what happened. And it broke the internet. By sunset, the sheriff himself came by. He wasn't smiling. You're about to have a media circus, he warned. We've got investigators crawling all over Red Oak. Karen's going to fight dirty. Keep everything documented. Don't go anywhere alone. He paused, then added, You're on the right side of this. But right doesn't always mean easy. Inside, my brother's phone kept buzzing. Tips, old victims of Karen and Red Oak coming forward. People offering evidence. Patterns emerged. Karen had forced out at least 6 families in the last 2 years, all tied to properties flagged for development. She had done it quietly, always with HOA authority and security that weren't real. Now her empire was cracking. But even as her image collapsed online, there was danger. A text came to my wife's phone from an unknown number. This isn't over. You've made powerful enemies. No name, no reply possible. Just a shadow of the machine we were poking. I felt my pulse tighten again. They're going to try something desperate, my brother said. We need to be ready. That night, sitting at the table while my daughter slept upstairs, I realized the war had moved beyond the porch. Karen was backed into a corner, and people like her don't go quietly. The next move wouldn't be legal or public. It would be something darker. And when it came, we'd have to be faster. The next morning, Karen's desperation was obvious. Her car screeched down the street, tires kicking up dust, but she wasn't alone. A black SUV followed close behind, tinted windows hiding the occupants. My brother caught it on the porch camera before I even realized she'd moved. "She's making a play," he muttered. "We need eyes on everything." I positioned myself near the front, my wife and daughter inside. Karen stomped out, phone in hand, barking orders. The man in the black SUV stepped out, another security type, bigger, armed, and looking like he meant business. Karen's face was twisted in fury. "They're trying to block me." "Take care of them," she screamed. My pulse went into overdrive. This wasn't about notices anymore. This was about intimidation and real violence. Before either side could move closer, headlights cut across the street. It was the local police, unmarked but clear. My brother had tipped them off, and they'd arrived quietly. 2 squad cars blocked the street, officers stepping out with weapons drawn, not threatening me, but ready for the worst. Karen froze. Her plans of a quick assault vanished. The officers approached slowly, shouting commands. "Everyone down! Step away from weapons!" The security men hesitated. Karen started screaming over them, trying to manipulate the chaos. But this time, the public and legal weight was on our side. Neighbors came out with phones raised. One shouted, "We saw everything last week." She's lying. The big twist hit when the lead officer stepped forward and held up the porch camera footage. Karen's face went pale as the footage played on a nearby officer's tablet. Her nod to the guard, her cash exchanges, her threats, all caught clearly. The backup security men realized they were trapped. Their orders now evidence of conspiracy, not authority. Karen tried to run, but my brother intercepted her, holding her by the arm until the officers cuffed her. She screamed, kicked, and shouted threats, but it was useless. The legal and public fronts had closed in, and her network of intimidation crumbled. Even the Red Oak men realized she had sacrificed them, and they quickly backed down. As she was escorted away, one officer turned to me. "You defended your family, you stayed calm, and you documented everything. You did everything right." Relief hit, but it was tinged with exhaustion. My daughter peeked around the curtain, eyes wide, and whispered, "Is it over?" I pulled her into my arms. "It's over," I said, finally feeling the tension start to drain. Later, the news reports aired. HOA Karen arrested for threatening family. Armed conspiracy exposed. Interviews with neighbors confirmed her pattern. The legal injunctions froze all her fake HOA actions and development plans. Her empire of fear and false authority had collapsed, leaving her powerless and exposed. That night, sitting on the porch with my wife and daughter, I looked at the hill behind our house, our land, our legacy, untouched. I realized the fight had been bigger than a single threat or a single morning. It was about protecting family, defending truth, and showing that even the most entitled, manipulative people could be held accountable when justice, evidence, and courage aligned. My brother placed a hand on my shoulder. "This isn't just about you. It's about every family she tried to push out. You made sure they'll be safe too." I nodded. The twist, the fear, the danger. It had all ended not with violence, but with exposure, proof, and unity. Karen had underestimated one thing. A family willing to fight smart, stand together, and never be intimidated. That night, after the adrenaline faded, I sat with my family on the porch watching the stars. The neighborhood was quieter than it had been in weeks, the hum of gossip replaced by normal life. My daughter leaned against me, finally relaxed, and my wife sipped tea with a tired smile. We had survived, yes, but the victory felt deeper than just Karen's arrest. It was about reclaiming our peace, our land, and our family's safety. The next morning, news reports highlighted the fallout. Karen's name trended nationwide, exposing her HOA schemes, Red Oak's shady involvement, and the attempted intimidation of families across the county. Local papers interviewed neighbors who shared their stories of harassment and fear. People spoke about courage, about standing up to entitled power, about the family who refused to back down. Our story became a symbol, proof that persistence, evidence, and unity could topple even the most manipulative and armed adversaries. Then came the final twist. Karen, behind bars, attempted to manipulate her lawyers to claim my family provoked the incident, framing me as the aggressor. But every shred of evidence, porch cameras, neighbor testimonies, her own messages, was airtight. The court dismissed her claims outright, and her HOA authority was permanently dissolved. Red Oak's ties were investigated, leading to several fines and suspensions. Karen's carefully constructed web of fear and lies unraveled completely. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Children played in yards, neighbors greeted each other, and I finally felt comfortable letting my daughter explore the hill behind our house freely. My brother stayed for a few more days, helping us document the last of the evidence and ensure Karen couldn't interfere legally or otherwise. Sitting on the porch one evening, my wife whispered, "We did it. We protected them, protected us." I nodded, knowing the danger had passed but also aware that vigilance was part of owning land and standing for what's right. I glanced at the cameras, silent now, a quiet witness to every moment of fear, bravery, and justice. The final, lasting twist was subtle but powerful. Karen had underestimated the simplest thing: family. Not her fake authority, her hired guards, or her manipulation could withstand the strength of truth, courage, and unity. And as the sun set over our property, we finally felt free on our land, safe in our home, and proud of the fight we had won together. The porch was quiet, the stars bright, and for the first time in weeks I could breathe. Justice had been served, not with revenge, but with proof, resilience, and heart. And that was a victory no HOA or hired thug could ever take from us. The end.